Good evening, friends. On this fourth day of GST webinar series organized by Ahmedabad branch of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. Now we are going to play. So I request all the participants to put their right hand on their heart. Dear participants, now I request Chairman of Ahmedabad branch, CA Fanil Shah, to address this webinar. But before that, sir, friends, I would like to share small incidents. When I and our chairman was discussing something, and he asked me, or I can say, given me an answer that Bishan bhai, are we not here to serve? And it gives me a great direction and the purpose. So welcome with big hands our chairman, humble and dynamic young chairman of Ahmedabad branch, CA Fanil Shah, to this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishan bhai. I believe that we should make the best of this 1.5 hour we are having, and when we are having a learned senior faculty with us, then we cannot waste the time. So I'll be giving my remarks very fast. I welcome the speakers, sir, of the day, N. Venkatraman, sir, an advocate, senior advocate from Chennai, the chairman of Bhuj branch, Jitendra Thakkar, the other chairmen virtually present with us, CA Vinay Sakaria, Rajkot branch, CA Bhavesh Thakkar, Anand branch, CA Manoj Goyal, Bhavnagar branch, CA Karan Thakkar, Gandhidham branch, CA Dipesh Bhuj, Jamnagar branch, the Indirect Tax Committee chairman of Ahmedabad branch, CA Rahul Maliwal, present by audio, our own secretary, CA Bishan Shah, the other members of all the branches of Gujarat. I welcome you all to this fourth day. Friends, as I appealed to you yesterday to donate, our Ahmedabad branch contribution to the COVID fund has reached to 35 lakhs. We have a target of 1 crore. So I still request you all that if you have yet not contributed, please contribute and let that details reach to us on the link which we have shared to you. Second important thing is I requested you to provide your views on how we can revive the economy. Very overwhelming response, constructive response is received to same. Seeing same, we are just in the evening with an email and we are going to start a research activity at our branch. So those who are inclined and want to participate in that are requested to fill that particular form. And branch is right now serving you by various knowledge-oriented programs. So we are trying, me on Mission, we are hardly trying to come up with some cultural on this webinar. We tried to test it, but right now it's not working. But soon we will come up with some cultural events like some half-an-hour musical or something like that. Also, we are planning to come up with an housey. Many more is there for you and your family members. As Bishan bhai said, we are eagerly trying to serve you the best we can serve. And if you have any queries, you kindly post in the group which are formed right now of WhatsApp. Bishan bhai and Rahul bhai both will coordinate and will ask to the speaker, sir, at the end. So with this words, now I request Rahul Maliwal to give the opening remarks on this particular session.
Thank you so much, Fanil bhai. Good afternoon to everyone. Welcome you all on the fourth day of the advanced GST series. Luckily today my mic is working, but my webcam is not working. The topic for the today's session is on the development in the GST. We have seen the recent development in GST by various court orders, like Gujarat High Court has given the order in case of the Mohit Mineral that that the ocean levy of the ocean freight is unconstitutional. We also have seen now the AAR of Rajasthan considered the director remuneration is liable to the RCM, and the list goes endless. Along with this all, we will be also see the impact of COVID-19 in the economy and as well as on the indirect tax regime of the country. To clarify and enlightening on the same, we have the master of all, the gurus of the indirect taxation that we can say, Advocate Venkatraman sir. His clarity of thoughts and command on topic will prove as the blessing in disguise during this particular pandemic. Now I request Chairman of Bruj branch to introduce the sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good evening, friends. First of all, I congratulate Penil Bhai, Bishan Bhai, and entire team of Ahmedabad branch for organizing GST web series. So I congratulate all the team. Thank you, sir. It is my pride and privilege to introduce today's speaker, Senior Advocate Sri N. Venkataraman sir. It is true, since it is very difficult to introduce within 2 minutes. So I will give brief introduction of sir. He is Senior Advocate in Supreme Court of India, having a large experience of professional practice over 30 years in field of indirect tax, direct tax, international taxation and transfer pricing. Besides the Supreme Court, he is appearing before the 23 High Courts and other various authorities in the area of constitutional validity and critical area of taxation, having a high value amount of dispute involved. He is recently in the indirect tax 3 weeks ago had appeared before the Delhi High Court and obtained a favorable interim order in one of India's largest indirect tax matter involving 40,000 crore for banking industries. Currently, he is doing High Court pitch matter before the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal at Bangalore on structured investment and business efficiency. And he is serving as a legal counsel for the major international accounting firm in India. He also comments, writes and delivers various lectures across the country on the taxation matters and important judgment throughout the various trades and other forums. He has also received Lifetime Achievement Awards by the International Association of Lions Club, and he is also associates various charitable activities. So, in other words, I can say that in short, we can say that he is one of the gems of India in the legal areas. So, thank you. Now I hand over back to sir.
Sir, now the floor is yours. This platform is yours. We request you to deliberate.
Yes, thank you, Vishnu. Can I start?
Yes, sir. I am changing. I'm making you this present.
Sharada Amboja Vadana Vadanambujai Sarvata Smakam Sannithim Kriya. Dear Fenil and Bishan, the Ahmedabad branch of the ICIA, dear listeners, well wishers, we are all focusing our intellectual study in spite of the fact we are all caught up in a pandemic situation. Thanks to technology and thanks to the initiative of so many people. Before we get into the topic, let's sincerely pray for more than 1 lakh departed souls out of this pandemic. May they reach a noble state. And with lakhs and lakhs caught up across the world in curative and preventive activities. Let's all pray that they all come back and resume normal lives with all of us. That should be our international prayer across the universe. And let's also, for a minute, thank and acknowledge the thousands and thousands of people who are, when all of us are staying indoors, there are so many which are slogging out selflessly in across the country to enable us to ensure our safety. We have all along been enjoying this safety because of our defense and army forces. Now we are enjoying the safety because of our civil forces. The various governments, ministers, the government officials, and down the line officers, till the last mile connect, each and every one, they are doing their very best selflessly. So let's be grateful to all of them and thank them and express our gratitude and indebtedness. With this basis, let's get into the topic. I requested Vishen, before we talk GST, which we keep talking again and again, and you have already had 3 good sessions, I thought I should share my views on what could be the possible outcome of this pandemic, because we now carry a lot of responsibilities beyond our profession and our professional stature and qualification, because there are so many who are clueless, so many, starting from your servant maid to your driver to anybody. Their communication links are either so dismal or distorted. They're all quite confused. What is going to happen to them tomorrow and to their families? So these are all moments where we need to be compassionate, where we need to be very sensible, where we need to be collaborate together. So for which, as professionals, we should have a fairly reasonable understanding and grip over what is likely to happen in the next immediate, short, medium, and long run for our economy and also the global economy. So I thought Vishen said it's a fantastic idea and you should work on it if possible. And therefore, having got the impetus from him and the rest of the team, I thought I should work on this first. So let me take you through a few slides on that. And of course, I will certainly discuss about Mohit and also the recent judgment of the AAR in the Rajasthan on directors' remuneration. I must thank these 3, your own fraternity, people coming from your own fraternity, these 3 people, PVS, Bala from Wipro, and Ranga, former partner of EY. They have supported me in this preparation. And I should also thank these lists, acknowledge these are the list of videos, talks, and other things, help from the economists, which we have taken in building this inputs, which we only hope serves the purpose and remains valuable for all of you. See, this is where we stand today. The whole priority of the world is protecting or saving human life. And the steps that have been taken so far is 162 countries have opted for lockdown. And the difference between this pandemic and the other natural calamities are there is no infrastructural damage. That's something in the whole downside. There is one upside, if any, is it has not caused any infrastructural damage. And the enormity of the situation is such that we all focus on saving lives, curing lives, and preventing its spread across. But as professionals, how do you take a sensible call? What is the situation today? Is it a switch off mode or a pass button scenario? I think we can certainly say it is only a pass button scenario and not a switch off mode, because economies have rebounded after seeing through several crisis moments, once in a few decades, and even in the long run, looking at the history over a century or even more. And therefore, the short term, all of us, the fear or the pain that occurs to our mind is, especially, see, there was hope, at least till yesterday, that the lockdown would only be partial. But it looks like that the government is extending it, and for good reasons. And state governments today have played extensive role in collaborating with the center to take this call. And the priority is now ensuring no infection spreads rather than trying to. So this is all something which we are going through our lives for the first time. And if we keep judging, this is right, that is right, and start writing in public domain, let's, whatever you write, it's a request to all my professional friends, whatever you speak, whatever you write, if possible, add positivity to it, because world now needs it. Many people need this direction. And therefore, let's pass this critical phase and let's see how we can regain this momentum. If you cluster the various industries, these are the big picture. The red indicates industries which are clearly the losers. The orange, industries which can pick back. And the green, industries, I mean, this is a borrowed slide. I would rather put not potential losers. There is nobody called a winner in a pandemic situation, but nevertheless, because it's a borrowed slide, I have used the same caption. I would say non-losers at the moment. And therefore, the first impression all of us should gather in our mind is everything is not lost, even though something even precious has been lost, and not lost forever, which we will see in the next few slides. So these are all cluster of industries. The economy of any nation has several angles and multitude perspectives. So we should balance all of them to understand whether whether there is total darkness, pitch darkness, that we are clueless. The situation does not appear to be so, in spite of the fact that 162 countries have locked their citizens into their homes. Now, these are all basic economic theories where recovery is considered to be three-phased. It can happen in any one of the three shapes. And out of the three, V is considered to be the most preferred or the most favorable, because V-shaped recovery is something which is quick, fast, and we virtually regain our space of what has been lost. In the case of U-shape, it's slow. The resultant outputs don't come that easily because of displacements. When it comes to L-shape, it's actually an ugly situation, arising out of huge structural damages, loss of capital, loss of labor, loss of production, loss of services, and serious impact across. So if you read the public domain, so each one will give their perspective between V and L. But what needs to be understood is, if you go by the past history of pandemics, there are about the Spain flu of 1918, the Asian flu of 1958, the Hong Kong of 1968, and the SARS. These important documents, I should take it from the president of HUL from his video talks, with consent through his management. And therefore, these pandemics have indicated very clearly that the recovery in the past has been weak. Even though economists and even government is, I wouldn't say skeptical, optimism is there. It's not impossible, but we can't push it beyond a point. So they all of them caution we should move into the V phase, but we should be prepared for any eventuality. So, but past history says it has been through the V phase. Now, what is India presently undergoing? See, it's very clear when you see so many deaths across the world, where India's preventive measures has been commented across and has been fairly very low, but still sickness prevention deters economic activity. And between West handling the situation and we handling the situation, there is always a difference in the resource. It will not be as adequate as they all have. And if you see, these are all indications by our former RBI governor in one of his interviews, where he says that China in the first quarter, which we have annualized it, has dropped by 35%. And West, which was growing at 2%, and Europe, which was going between 1 and 1.5%, is likely to see -4 or -5%. And in spite of all this, the indications are China is likely to grow by 1% and India by 2.1%. Again, it's an optimistic thinking, but it is not impossible, is what many see. Now, coming to the percentage of stimulus that is happening, if you will find a country like Malaysia has put 16% in the stimulus package, US 10%, Germany 8%, Italy 3.8%, whereas India has done 1%. But that should not, with this comparative, you should know the size of their economy, either size or their capacity or their need. So we can't be making a statement when the 10% of GDP of US has been given. India should also, I mean, there has been recommendations even by very reputed and recognized trade bodies to that extent. But what is possible and what is needed? In fact, economists again have different views on that. By trying to put more money into stimulus, it should not shake the confidence of foreign investors. That's one view. So you have to factor several things when you take such decisions and move forward. So India has put 1% of its resources into this stimulus package. And the positive side of India, again, as it stands today, is our current account level is either from 0 to slight mild plus. And there is no immediate need for foreign resources. And only if, as long as we safeguard the present foreign investments and they don't leave us, then we don't have big issues in that front. And we have a fat, solid, valuable asset of 470 billion of foreign exchange. Now, how does, we are all talking of social distancing so much. Now, how has it impacted the industry? I feel it has impacted in 4 different ways. And I classify them in 4 categories through this slide: technology-based industry, labor-intensive, logistic-dependent industry, and period-based industries and services. These are the 4 broad classifications we can possibly make for our understanding. In the case of technology-based, it's doing very well, extremely well. They are all either 80 or 80 plus of what they have been operating at. And thanks to the government and the Ministry of Commerce, especially for their overnight intervention in diluting the guidelines on SEZ and STP and allowing thousands and thousands of employees to work from home. Yes, people will attempt to abuse. And this was also hinted to them. It's not that they are not aware of that fact, but now the need is not prevention of abuse. The need is to ensure that they sustain and they keep going. And therefore, people who abuse needs to be pursued. But we only make a passionate request: don't exploit in such a grave situation and try to be part of the mainstream. So this is one major decision which has helped the techno industry to stay on board. When it comes to labor intensive industries, other than continuous process industries, which are all fairly on stream, there has been a major lockdown in the manufacturing sector. it has serious implications, and its solutions have to be quite only long term. But eventually, this is something, because we have, life is more precious than anything else. And as governments, state or center, their call has always been only that, and it can only, that alone can be the call. And this has been the call universally. Therefore, manufacturing sectors are worst affected. Third is the logistics services. Because now the logistics move on two ways. It moves through technology, that's one logistic, and it moves through transportation, another logistic. The transport-based logistics services have again seen the worst, and any industry or services dependent on that logistics have also been seriously affected. And when it comes to the period-based services, they are the worst. Why do we say period-based? You can't travel back in time or catch it. Like hospitality, aviation, tourism, and entertainment. Hotel does not get booked for 3 months, then it's not booked, it's gone forever. So these are all period-based services, and in fact, they should become the targeted industries for revival. And I think certainly government will consider this and do something to it in the revival scheme. They are the worst hit, and they need to be targeted and brought back. Now, this social distancing has brought enormous radical change in the business models. See, every industry tried work at home, and they are all having this option, many, but it has never been implemented in such a large scale. But now this is making its inroads, especially in education. See, for ourselves. Otherwise, see, but for this, Vishen would have called me, summoned me to Ahmedabad to give this lecture, and it would have been confined only to people from Ahmedabad. Whereas now, so many from other branches of ICA across Gujarat and across India are participating. So the need to interact has not stopped. And as long as communication and interaction is possible, then those dependent industries and services are thriving, because it materially doesn't matter whether you operate from home or operate from your office. 2, huge business and policy making decisions continue to progress. You won't believe huge international investments, discussions on these subjects are still happening in India with Indian industries. Please take my word. I say this with a deep sense of responsibility as a professional. So, why? Because cross-border communication has become easy. 3, this has also shown us the guidance and light how to penetrate healthcare to the last mile connect. It's the first time, and especially we should be very, very thankful to the state governments for their enormous effort. The police force, the medical force, the doctors, the nurses. Thank God, if one person is found identified, they block in rural areas, they block chains of villages. The control and custody they take in ensuring is fantastic. And therefore, this has ensured us to understand health penetration is so indispensable, and it is possible. Then consultancy and advisory is again one of the major areas which is continuing to progress in spite of this pandemic. So what is worst affected is the manufacturing sector, and in the long run, the industry necessarily has to think and align itself to run through technology. See, industrial machines are run through technology, no doubt, but the business models of manufacture will now sit and invent methods where they will be able to run their business remote. Whether how far, it's all labor intensive. It is intensive in several aspects to it, but how best we should penetrate is something which the world will look for it. Creative business and business tools are going to come. It has already come. It's within 3 weeks, so much of creation, so much of permutations. And there is a hint that there will be a huge migration of crowd. And some businesses may go out and the migration will be adapted or absorbed in other businesses over a period of time. This is something which we need to wait and watch. And the clear caution everybody gives us is there is no one size fit all solution. No economy should attempt it. And it's not one size fit all against across businesses. It has to be industry specific, because this pandemic has shown that demands that have been lost, damaged, delayed, or deferred is not organic. It is very, very specific and exclusive. These are the lessons we have learned out of this pandemic in these few weeks. And therefore, the solution should be tailor-made and not one size fit all. Now, what is the impact of COVID on the consumers? See, world by nature has become a consumer-based society. It's not that GST alone is a destination-based tax. GST alone is a destination-based tax. World has moved towards this concept of consumption. Today, this is exactly what we as professionals should. If you reach to 10 people, you reach to 10 people. If you're able to reach for 100 people, whatever is your reach, please reach them and make. This is a national duty. It's a duty towards everybody. We should take that as a personal commitment as professionals, because we should be able to do it sensibly without any strain on emotions, and say that there is a loss of confidence to such a level, whether we will be able to eat, whether we will be able to buy groceries, will a kilo of rice will cost 5,000 rupees. These are all things which are running in people's mind. Therefore, there is a loss of confidence generally. And this time, the financial instability is throwing out from the bottom. When you see the meltdown and all those things, it was either at the middle or at the top. This time, the instability is at its roots. It's at the consumer level. They have lost money in the stock market. They are worried about their deposits. They're worried about their salaries. They're worried about their immediate employment. Millions and millions of people across the world are now attrition is happening at a very, very, very rapid pace. Therefore, this financial instability this time is at its roots. That's something concerning, and therefore largely economies and citizens of various countries are quite pessimistic. Pessimism now. That is why, see, you take any recovery is always possible only through optimism and positivism, and not through pessimism. And this time we have a responsibility to go to the last citizen of this country to reach out, because they are all either illiterate or semi-literate, or they have their own illusions. So because I still hail from my village and I still have a nativity and connectivity to my village, I'm speaking it from that sense. The sense of fear that is gripping a villager is very, very enormous. And therefore, that pessimism has to change. And the financial crisis are classified into the crisis. Whenever it's a financial crisis, it immediately afflicts or gives a shock only on the supply side. Because this pandemic has given a shock both at the demand and the supply sides, leading therefore to a financial crisis, and the cycle becomes extremely vicious. And to add to this instability for a consumer like all of us, the biggest concern today amongst as the citizens of the village, in the villages and remote areas, have their own concerns about daily groceries. Middle class and upper middle class are quite concerned about the safety of their monies in the banks. That is something which is causing a huge concern, because last 2-3 years, India has not been having a good picture in all the sectors of the financial market, may it be private banks, may it be public banks, may it be NBFCs, may it be cooperative banks. These are all throwing us a lot of concern. Therefore, the RBI governor has stepped in to say, don't worry, your money is safe. That assurance is something that has come from the RBI governor, and therefore we should all stick to that statement. And this is one panic which is running through the hearts of all the commoners. Now, what are the micro and macro level possibilities? The micro level, the biggest surge is going to be digital e-business and e-commerce and e-industry. This is something which is going to become inevitable, and it will all become customized. Instead of getting outsourced, they will all have their own ways to invent and stay on course. And big digital public tools will be the next phase of our business life. At a macro level, two things they all predict can happen. This anti-globalization is something which we have been reading a lot in the last 5 years. World is slowly becoming again reached this globalization has survived for 25, 27 years. But the downside of globalization is it is not pure capitalism. It is capitalism plus greed, what they call it. Others across the world call it as the anomai. So this greed, which has seeped into this capitalism and made it as globalization, has produced its own ill effects in different countries in different ways. And therefore, there was a general move to go anti-global. And now, whether pandemic will be used as one of the tools to go anti-global is something which we'll have to wait. And we'll have to also see how the world reacts to convergence or unilateralism. So we are talking people not to abuse or exploit, but we don't know how economies and countries will try to position themselves. This is one aspect which can. So what sort of an alignments will happen? So what sort of a unilateral exercise or a convergence? This has a serious impact on the whole world economy, and definitely with India, which is a growing power. So this is something which nobody has any visibility at this point of time, but we should get some picture after a while. Of course, the first indication, Japan has taken some decisions today, which all of you would have seen. The last 2 days, it's all there in the public domain. And let's see, well, that's going to be the basis, and how one strong pronouncement by a very strong nation has come now into the public domain. And we'll have to only wait and see how economies react to it. Do's and don'ts. They all say projections can go every. That's why everybody is saying we should be optimistic, but we should be prepared for the worst. But we should not be pessimistic because we won't work. And generally don't believe stock markets to decide the future. It has pulled all of us and many of us many a times. And therefore, they will not be a basis for deciding how the economy is doing well or doing bad, because stock market is a cluster of impossibilities, imponderables, and several other effects to it. Now, second indication is financial turbulence is now universal, starting from the lowest to the richest person in this world. Financial turbulence is one disease which has caught hold of all of us, but that should not result in grounding of any business. Now, which economy will surge and which economy will go to the back seat depends on the decision-making ability, the coalescing effect, and the convergence between those turbulent industries and what government is going to do in the long run. This is something which it's not turbulence, it's not something which can be ironed out as a business decision alone, because it is consumer oriented, it is export oriented, it is connected with other reactions of businesses, and above all, policymakers should also be supporting it. So this is one very important aspect which can happen. Then organic, as I said, it is industry specific and nation specific, and therefore we don't have to be so tailor-made. Now coming to do's, this is a responsibility which all of us have. Consumer confidence is something we have to be very clear about it. How best we revive how best we come back to join the mainstream. To that extent, economy, we are supporting the economy to that extent to get itself steady and grow. Then leadership at the team levels and at the managerial levels will all undergo a change. Now, in fact, Sanjeev Mehra very clearly says we will now find teams comprising of permanent people, temporary, and then say people who are all a freelancer. All these things will come slowly into picture. Now, at a human level, industries and businesses, leaders who are common composed. This is a period, testing period. One who is common composed will move forward, and that's the test. And he should remain calm or she should remain calm, but ensure they kindle and collaborate with the teams very well. And lastly, very important is liquidity and cash will determine future stability. So this pandemic has, in fact, India as an economy has survived every time only because of our ability and our propensity to save. We have always believed in savings, and let any economy go for a toss anywhere, we will always kick back because we have always saved. So this pandemic is a clear caution or an indication for rest of the world to follow, but definitely for all of us, especially the youth, who now believes more in spending and less in saving. People who have liquidity and cash have an edge over the rest. This pandemic is showing that very clearly. Now, 60 to 65 million new jobs are likely to come is the hope. 40 to 45 million jobs will get displaced due to displacement or transfer of technology. Then, more importantly, as I said, freelance, permanent, and temporary all will put together. And business will depend on the agility, creative organic content, and more importantly, hereafter. See, business leaders, team leaders, managers, you can't be teasing people and getting work done. Now, these 4, 5 weeks and 6, 7 weeks of emotional gathering, emotional stuff, all of us now realize how important marriage is, how important is family life is. It's a time where we should think and register this aspect in our mind. So emotions matter in life, and therefore a new leadership has to emerge. One who can collapse, who can organize, and who can actually ensure a proper coordination and human connect and compassionate connect will now surge as big leaders. Now, India has the following opportunities and problems. We are a very large population. We don't know. This can deter and postpone economic development is one concern, because the social distancing is a huge challenge for us because we do not know how long. This is one disease which is remaining still clueless. Why it has come, how it has come, and what is the cure, everything is now a matter of guess. And therefore, with a huge population and a very congested inhabitation, which we are used to, we saw the rate of deaths at Dharavi and other places. So, social distancing at that grassroots level challenges is going to be one major area. The second major area will be unorganized and organized sector and labor. And see, everybody is now talking about it, and we only hope it happens. Whether this will give an opportunity for agriculture to join the mainstream is one big wish. And services and services will immediately stabilize. Manufacture is going to be a long-term destination issue. Now, these are the areas where we actually require government support. In redistribution of labor, revival of agriculture, sustenance of the service sector, and handling migrant workers for gainful employment, and revival of the rural economy. Now, these are the measures which India is currently doing, and all the governments are responsible for this. We should thank all of them and also all the private agencies, all the NGOs, all the CSRs, all the corporates, all the individuals, professionals. See, so happy to hear that one branch of ICAI has contributed 35 lakhs and you have targeted 1 crore. Hats off to you. I stand up and salute each one of you for your commitment, for your moral commitment and your ethical commitment in ensuring people are taken care of. And therefore, this is something now social media of late, and any issue we try to gather together and do what best we can offer. So these are all the things which is happening now in the country. Food ration and financial assistance, then makeshift medical assistance, then policy decisions in waiver. I'll come to that little later. Tax subsidies, and more importantly, one business we have to be there when whether this is one opportunity or not. We'll have to only wait and see. If world is going to not prefer Chinese products, if that's going to be a call by the world, then will India be a beneficiary? Is something which we'll have to see and watch. Now, with this, I'll go to the GST part because ultimately, whatever may be the crisis, it has an impact ultimately on finance, the stability of and the health of the industry and the service sector. So it's better we know the broad announcements of the RBI. RBI has made, this is something which I've taken it from the CNBC channel content, and RBI has made two important announcements. More money to the banks for lending and more time for the borrowers to pay. This is the big picture. And how are they going about it? Because you're all accountants, most of you, and you will therefore understand numbers. I thought I'll go through the numbers also for your benefit. See, banks, when the borrowing rates by banks from the RBI has been at 5.15%. It is now brought down to 4.4 with an idea to pass on the benefit to the consumer. Similarly, the deposits of the banks with RBI was yielding an interest of 4.9. That has now come to 4, forcing banks not to keep money with RBI, but to keep it in circulation. The second major decision. The third major decision is the cash reserve ratio, or what they call it the lazy money. Normally, it is at 4%. The government has said, let us keep it at 3%, and it is releasing 1% of it, which comes to 1.37 lakh crores, because the total deposits is 137 crores. Now, 1% comes to 1.37 lakh crores. Now, then borrowings are permitted against collaterals and slightly higher amounts, of course, with a slightly higher interest also. On the whole, now banks will be in a position to lend 2.8 lakh crores more into the market. We saw through the last budget in August, interim budget in July, and this budget in March, together, government has ensured almost 2 lakh crores of money remains with the consumers. Instead of collecting it as tax and they spending it, they decided to have it with us, giving the discretion to spend, to invest, or to save. So those 2 lakh crores plus this 2.8 lakh crores of loans, which is to stimulate, is a package that has been conceived of at the moment. Then they have also given the option of banks to buy money and then go back for back-to-back bonds, corporate bonds. Therefore, these are at the lending stage. With the thrust, give more money, give it cheap, and force them to lend. Now, at the borrowing side, they have deferred it for 3 months and reschedule all payments thereafter. So if it is 24, then it becomes 27. And the whole period gets extended by 3 months. Working capital limits have been increased from the original levels, and especially to meet fixed establishment costs. Therefore, and with the promise that they will watch and do the needful, and with an assurance that all our monies are safe, may it be in public banks or in private banks. So up to this, we have come about trying to know about our economy. Now, let's get into the GST part. The expected monthly collection of GST is 1.25 lakh crores per month. But we have touched the highest in April last year, collecting 1.13 lakh crores. And it fell down in January to 97,597 crores. So say 98,000 crores. This is February. Now from March onwards, it's going to dwindle much more. Coming months are going to be very, very challenging. And because GST is a destination-based consumption tax, tax would come into the kitty only if consumption revises. So between saving, between investing, between spending, especially top line luxury industry, luxury spending, luxury holiday, luxury services, luxury will take a back seat is the assumption at the moment. See, people may speak in public domain to say we're all eager to go back on a holiday, eager to do all that. Those are all pep talks, nice work, good, all fine. But there is a concern that money and money's value in the long run and in the short run. So these are all the sectors. So what is the remedy? Is this, so people are saying flat, reduce all 18% into 12 and 18% into 14 and bring it as 12% and 14% and remove every other. So these are all suggestions, knee-jerk and all that. But there are two sides to it. One, the business has to show its interest. Three, government should also collect resources in whatever best possible way to give it back in different forms, including welfare. Of course, government spending, government salary, all that is there. Non-planned and excessive expenditure is all that. But taking all that into consideration, factoring all that into consideration, balancing this, it's not going to be that very easy. And because GST is now a cooperative levy, and both center and states are joint partners on this, states also carry a huge responsibility to drive and ensure that consumer consumption takes place so that they have more collection. This is the immediate aspect for GST to fall down is consumption. Wherever, for example, the GST out of hotel, GST out of aviation, GST out of tourism will be zero in these 3 months. Virtually zero. What will they get to pay? So this is so directly, and earlier we had a tax on manufacture, we had a tax on, we had different multiple taxes, but we don't have to be worried about that. Not to say that therefore we should have had that whole system. No, not at all. This is connected to consumption, and therefore it will have a serious impact the next few months till the revival is back on stream. Now, let me take the first two rulings which was hinted that I should speak about. One is about the ocean freight. Of course, another is about the director's remuneration. Both are quite interesting cases, and more importantly, when it comes to the decision on ocean freight, it is a case which could have been possibly decided, say, in half an hour and with 2 pages. But the passion with which the learned judges have authored the judgment and delivered it, it's something which the counsels have assisted the court well, and the judgment has come so neat that these are all the initial judgments on GST from high courts, which will stand as strong pillars in building the decision-making exercise of GST over a period of time. Because why I'm saying this as a professional is this is the concern I see. At one end, high courts are showing a lot of interest and throwing their capabilities around it and trying to author judgments to ensure that the law is laid out correctly for others to follow. That concern is there with every judge. I say this with a clear conviction and sense of responsibility, because I do address National Judicial Academy very frequently, where judges of various high courts come. And when we do the talk on GST, he might be a judge completely in civil law. He will say, no, I'm interested to know. This looks to be a current law. I want to know it thoroughly. Can you assist us in guiding us and tell us which are the tools we need to access? And GST is one law which is more than abundantly practiced by chartered accountants. Before the annual of GST, it was more with industry heads and consultants, and of course that way. Individual chartered accountants were not doing much of indirect taxes. But GST is one area which has forced all of you to invade, because it's a new law. And many of you have given YouTube lectures, etc., trying to fill intellectual perspectives also to this law. So, and in fact, I used to say this in every forum. A couple of articles I was surprised that chartered accountants have touched on the constitutional perspectives and brought it. Not that, when I say surprised, I mean it in the happy sense that that's the level and intensity of interest all of you are showing to learn this law. So when high courts are doing there, we find every day this advanced ruling authority coming out with judgments which is catastrophic, chaotic, to say the least, to be with sincere respect. And not because, in fact, those people are also very intelligent to decide. Their capabilities are not questionable. But they feel that they just can't do what they can do or render it, because it will be a constraint. So constraint is what is staring at them. You see left, right, and center. In fact, this is something which I've been personally voicing in every forum possible. If possible, scrap AAR the way it has been happening. If not, make AAR and appellate AAR few in number, and give representations for each cases. Suppose Karnataka has to decide one matter, it will have a representative from Karnataka. You don't have to have AAR every state. This is not a federal requirement. After all, we have tribunals which are only few in number in certain cases. Even though we are a federal, so it doesn't say every state should have a tribunal. So these are all matters of convenience and prudence. In this case, it's a matter of prudence. We can't have this many AARs and this many judgments. Everything decided 100 out of 100 against the assessees. So this is not going to do well. GST Council has to take a call very, very quickly, and this should not result in a pandemic situation for GST. That's the concern. When the law is well streamlined and when states and centers are quite well organized, we should not get into a invited phase of catastrophe through this AAR rulings. This is my first caution. Now, coming, why I'm saying all this is the way this judgment has been authored by the learned judges. Hats off to them. This is the kind of quality and content which we should expect if GST has to stabilize in this country. It's a simple issue. You book a order, a cross-border purchase from some country, which is CIF, and you pay the money to the bank and import the goods into the country. For time immemorial, customs law says the duty has to be on CIF value, and customs law has not undergone any change because of GST. So you have discharged the value on CIF on consolidated value. Now, the insurance and freight, even though it's part of the value, you are not entering into any contract with those people. You are not hiring the transport. Therefore, it becomes part of one consolidated price of the supplier, and the whole responsibility of hiring the transport is vested with the supplier. So it is a single sale invoice of a single contract of a delivery at your door at the port of import. So in such a case, can you churn out a service of a transportation and a reverse charge? See, let's understand the root principle very clearly. Reverse charge under the GST law is perfectly justified, because anybody can be a taxable person. We have no quarrel on that. But there must first be an underlying service. And there must first be an what do you mean by service? We have always defined it, courts have always defined it. A service provider, a service recipient, a transmission of service, followed by a consideration. These are the four natural, inevitable requirements for service. Now, where do you find this happening here in this ocean freight? You are not a service recipient, nor is the transporter a service provider. There is no contract between both of you for payment of freight. So, no agreement, no service provider, no service recipient, no consideration, no transmission of service, yet you impose a reverse charge. Absolutely unsustainable, especially when you have collected import duty on the same value. Now, it is not in the judgment, but because you are all professionals, I'm just giving you a dimension for you to understand. You may say, sir, we have always seen in indirect tax, agglomeration of values has nothing to do with taxability. Let's have an example in the old regime. So I manufacture a boiler and I engage a consultant to do a design. So when the consultant delivers a design to me, he renders a service to me. I pay to him, take the service and integrate with the boiler, and the value of the service also gets added to the boiler. So you pay an excise duty for the boiler as well as a service tax in those days for the design work given by the consultant. So there are two levies. So that is the basis for this ocean freight. There is a CIF value on which you pay customs duty. There is an inherent transportation charge to it. Why don't you pay service charge on that and pay a reverse charge of GST on that? This was the question that they raised. They didn't raise it in the court. This is the perspective which we could have, the highest somebody could have put it, though not put it. But the answer is very simple. In that case, which we took as an example, there are two contracts. There is first a contract with the customer for a boiler, which you need to produce. You in turn enter into a subcontract with the consultant to give you a design. So that subcontractor, when he delivers it to you, then you add it to integrate it to the value. Here, whom are you subcontracting what? Therefore, the whole premise of a double possibility of a double levy, double aspect, all this is a mirage. It's virtually impossible to decipher or unearth any such, peel out any such transactions out of an ocean freight. It should simply fall flat on this ground at all, on this ground alone. So the learned judges concluded 2-3 interesting points. They said there is no contract. But when you read the judgment carefully, the learned judges have put forth the question, why not we say the Indian importer to be a beneficiary? And it has also been argued very well by the counsels to say, now we can say Paul Merchant has been validated by a high court. Because all the export based on Paul Merchant, thousands of cases are pending in various forums, including the Honorable Supreme Court. So this will be one more shot in the arm for the industry to say the difference between a beneficiary and a recipient is this. This has been confirmed one more time by the learned judges of the Gujarat High Court. They have concluded saying nicely that a beneficiary should also be a recipient who pays consideration. So he loses the tag of a beneficiary and becomes a service recipient. Whereas somebody who has no contract and doesn't pay a consideration and still benefits out of the transaction, he simply remains only a beneficiary and doesn't become a service recipient. And more importantly, what they decided was the taxability of IGST. This is a judgment which is a very defining judgment to that extent also. All of us know under the Constitution, any tax law can be extraterritorial. You can travel. That's why we are having cross-border transaction. We are having transfer pricing adjustments in this country. And service tax or GST or reverse charge. So cross-border taxation is very much allowable. Extraterritorial taxation is allowable as long as it is traceable to India. Now, they have very clearly said, when the supplier is located outside India and the transporter or the shipping agent is also located outside India, contracts are located outside India, payments happening outside India, when everything is happening outside India, how do you say IGST can extend to such a transaction? There is some conclusive findings on this issue also by the learned judges. And one more angle has also been settled. They said that when the Indian recipient, Indian importer is only a beneficiary and not a recipient, if you tax him, you cannot also give him the credit. Of course, if you tax him, they may call him a service recipient and give the credit. That's a possibility. But they've simply ruled it out also from that angle to say no ITC is also allowable in this case. And therefore, there is no levy. They have ensured that the levy is ruled out at both ends. And the double levy theory has been completely dislodged, quite rightly too. Now coming to this Rajasthan avatar, we should try to clarify a few things on this. Hey, Bishan?
Sir, yes, yes.
Now, how long should I go? Is there a question answer, or I should go till the end?
No, sir. You will complete your presentation, and then there are 2-3 questions currently. I request you to, if we have to extend for half an hour, then there will be no issue, sir.
Okay. Now I will do one thing. In the next 10-15 minutes, I'll have to wrap up and then take the questions. Okay. So
yes,
that I hope people are.
You please conclude your presentation, hold the presentation, and then we can take. There are minimum questions currently. Okay.
Fine. Now, coming to director's remuneration. See, we should understand few basic facts and its premise correctly. And the judgment is certainly wrong. That's no doubt about it. But my concern is even the way the case has been argued is also wrong. And of course, this decision has simply not considered anything. It records all the submissions on all sides and simply concludes in 3 sentences, this is taxable. So it's no judgment, no reasoning, nothing. But more importantly for us to understand, it has also not been presented in the right perspective. See, this director remuneration is a very misleading phrase in law. So let us go to the root and understand the problem. We will get answers very easily. If your role is that of an employee under the contract, don't go by designations. Then we will land up in a erroneous area. When you deal this issue, don't deal the designation first. Throw the designation out. Forget it. Find out his contractual obligations. Whether he or she is an employee of the company or not. A managing director, an executive director, they are all ultimately employees of the company. They are all working under a contract of employment, though designated as director. So you will have 3 variations in any company structure. 1, pure employees who may not adorn the mantle of a director. 2, you will have only pure directors who may not adorn the mantle of an employee. And 3, you will have people who are employees also adorning the mantle of directorship. There is a 4th possibility, somebody who has been in the 3rd category, say post-retirement, after some time, they move out. The managing director moves and still holds himself as part of the board. It is happening in many industries. Transitions are happening in this country, major industry, major companies, transitions happening, where the family member steps out. Till yesterday, they would have been in the CMD. Today, they step out and allow somebody else to take over, and they go to the board. Then they throw out that robe as an employee and become a director. So there are 4 possibilities in this business. Now, first of all, these possibilities have not been put in an order in the case. I'm not blaming anybody for this. There has been some, because they have always been arguing in the case. They are deemed to be employees. There is no deeming. You don't have to deem. One who cannot be deemed as an employee can never be deemed. One who is an employee, he adorns the robe of a director not through a deeming fiction, by conviction of law. That is the case for assumption or deeming. No way. So these are the 4 different dispensations possible for a director. Therefore, now test the law. You will get the answer yourself. You don't need a ruling at all on this. If you are an employee, the salary paid to you will only be an employer-employee relationship consideration, a compensation or a consideration as an employer-employee, employer-employee, which can never be taxed either under the old service tax law or under the new GST. Not possible. Therefore, to this extent, the judgment taxing salary is absurd. Of course, it doesn't give reasons, but we should also understand this difference. Only then we will also be able to advise correctly. So, employer-employee resulting in salary, irrespective of the nomenclature he or she has, goes out of taxation. Now, come to the rest of the 3. One, somebody who is an employee doesn't become a director at all. No problem. He or her or his salary will always be out of it. Third, people who are only directors, they are not employees. So their sitting fee, their commission, etc., will go out. 4, people who had been, somebody was a managing director till he or she was a managing director till yesterday. Today he or she is in the board. Then whatever is paid as a sitting fee or commission or whatever emoluments which are paid post the relinquishment, then that will not be liable to GST. So you should not confuse reverse charge. Reverse charge is always a charge. Reverse charge is also a charge. It is not a supercharge or undercharge. It is also a charge. So unless it meets with the requirements of charge, you can't trigger reverse charge. It's elementary. You can't say it is reverse charge, therefore directors have to pay. It's absurd. Absolutely absurd. So these 4 dispensations, what will get excluded from taxation is a pure employer-employee will exclude. A dual relationship, employer-employee consideration will get excluded as salary. Rest of the emoluments, because he wears 2 hats, that will be liable to GST. In fact, they themselves say in this case, we are paying on the commission. See, they have put some 5-6 names, and they have not identified who is full-time, who is part-time, who is doing what, and what is his contractual. See, ultimately go by the contract. When you give an opinion based on this judgment, take these 4 principles and factor this into account, and then come to a conclusion. All right. Now we'll go to the next one. This is a very important, interesting issue on national NAE, because it's a national anti-profiting, and also the entity involved is also a very famous Patanjali entity. Both the authority and the entity, because of the name of the assessee, the entity has also now become famous. So this Patanjali has been imposed 75 crores as anti-profiting, as profiting through their businesses. So what are the facts? See, they are all into consumer business. On 15th November 2017, prices of many rates were reduced in many products. 28 became 18 in many products, and 18 became 12 in many products. Now there is an obligation under GST that once there is a reduction in the rate, stocks moving out and existing stocks in various places governed by MRP or non-MRP as the case may be, the benefit of reduction in tax on those goods should be passed instantaneously. You can't say these goods are excluded, no good is excluded. Everything is liable to this reduction. The impact of the reduction has to pass on without any murmur. This is the law. Now, they did a comparative study. They took the values from 1st November to 14th November and took the sale that took place between 15th November 2017 to 31st March 2019. I do not know whether these stocks have been sold till then. Never mind. That looks to be the bandwidth of inquiry. And they have come to the investigating agencies came to a conclusion that the reduced rates are sitting tight as usual in the prices. They have loaded it into the price, taxed it at the revised rates, and appropriated the profits. That's their case. Simple. Please understand, anti-profiting inquiries are a question of facts. Big law is not rocket science. It is simple facts, simple proof of evidence. You must understand this principle. So I think since they didn't have much material, whenever this is more a strategy for professionals, plan A, plan B. When you are weak on facts, then argue on law. That appears to be the strategy resorted to in this case, because all the grounds of rejection by the authority are more or less only on law, and facts seems to be not contested serious. This is all I'm saying, selling from the order. I have no access to the entire submissions. Just go by the order. So first of all, they took a plea that is a violation of natural justice, and the order throws out evidence after evidence of saying how many rounds of investigation, how many rounds of communications being sent to you, how many replies you have given, how many times you have participated. What are you talking that we have not given you an opportunity? Then they questioned that authority has no suo motu power to inquire. Any investigative agency can either act on a private complaint, or the investigating agency first have only suo motu power. It's natural to them. Investigation means what? Then such investigation agencies can always be supported also by a private complaint, which is what is happening in competition law, happening in any place. Now, if nothing works, you go to the public interest litigation route before the court and say these have to be investigated and inquired. And you go to criminal law, which is expanding every day. All Tom, Dick, and Harry is taking everybody. You want to take a big citizen, a leading citizen of this country, you can take him for a ride by filing a private complaint, talking X, Y, Z in it. So this business of a private complaint is of a recent origin out of necessity. But natural power of an investigation agency is always to initiate suo motu. What's the problem? Therefore, this was one point which they raised, and that got rejected. The third point they raised was you don't have a judicial member in the body, and therefore, based on the Madras Bar Association case, that will all apply only to courts and quasi-judicial bodies. Of course, this is a quasi-judicial body, but not in the stature of a tribunal. It is an investigative body. And as a part of investigation, it plays an adjudicatory role. So an investigative body coupled with an adjudicatory role should be filled also with judicial members is taking the law to an extreme end. And therefore, this also got rightly rejected. Then they argued no clear-cut methodology. See, these writ petitions are pending in Karnataka, in Mumbai, in Delhi, on the constitutional validity on certain aspects. But all of them are also issuing interim orders. They should continue with it. That's what they have also recorded in this case. We've been allowed to pass orders, and therefore, let's see. And it has broadly given how it can examine the clear-cut method and methodology available to it and its powers. The fifth ground which they raised was it gave a conclusion. The company contended, no, what are we saying? We have sent mails to all our distributors to reduce prices, and they have followed MRP. So they were taking a tactical position, which was rejected by the authority for two reasons. It says the obligation to show proof and evidence is with you. Show me the evidence you have reduced. Email is not a basis of proof. And two, when we say you should roll back and pass on the benefit, it's a very interesting dimension. It's a law which all of us should understand. What they mean is, if there is a rate cut, there must be a corresponding rate cut in the MRP. If you have not changed your MRP and you show mails and evidence to say that there is a reduced collection of prices, you are not going to bill. It looks slightly extreme. It may contextually fit into this case because no evidence appears to have been given from what little we could read from the judgment. But it may not be also this straitjacketed approach can also be sometimes dangerous. It is true, the best proof is showing the rate cut in the reduced MRP. It's the best practice, best evidence. But law of evidence does not rely every time only on best evidence. It also relies on collateral or supportive or allied evidence or associated materials, which can still throw or point out to such a conclusion. Suppose somebody has not reduced the MRP, but upon fall in the rates, internal communications have been circulated and stockists have been informed, and based on which stockist is raising invoices, passing on the burden. Now, you will have two sets of evidence. Your MRP of 100 will continue to remain as 100. And suppose the benefit that needs to be passed is at 95. You keep invoicing till, suppose you till yesterday you have been invoicing it at 100. And you're able to show we have passed on the benefit because from today we have only raised it at 95. Can somebody question it and say, no, you have not amended, restamped your MRP, therefore this evidence is not a valid evidence. That is something which is debatable according to me. If you are able to show rate cut is ultimately a question of evidence, MRP is the best proof because it's statutorily you can't go beyond that. The metrology department will be chasing you. But if you're able to show till yesterday I was charging on the MRP or less than MRP, suppose MRP is 100, I was charging at 95. And from tomorrow I charge at 89, consistently, based on instructions given to the stockist. Suppose there's a revision in price, henceforth you charge only 89 and pass on, and I show evidence. Can you say that you are not done with you are not done away with your MRP and therefore I won't give you the benefit? Slightly looks to be a slightly extreme view. And they also, like cum duty benefit, they wanted a cum duty benefit on this, which was also rejected, saying that look at this, you have come here collecting not only the extra price but also the tax attendant to it, and therefore we will not be able to give you the benefit of that. And this is how this is a it's a 150-page, 100-page order, but the findings are there. The last 30 pages, 25 pages. It gives it an interesting read, and of course, there's a caveat to it. The section, article, the provisions are all under challenge, but they have been saddled with an profit making of about 75 crores and a recovery mechanism. In fact, they argued in one. They finally argued the length of investigation looks to be very arbitrary, for which they have given a very interesting finding. They said length is between 15/11/2017 to 31/3/2019, no doubt. But have you passed on the benefit before March 2019? You would not have come to you. Even after 2 years, almost 1.5, 2 years, you have not done it. And therefore, there is a need to come to you. That's the counter, the order says. Okay. Also continuing. Okay. I'll skip this. With this, I'll come to a close. It's a very interesting notification how you can make an absurd reading out of it. That's what I just put the notification alone here. See, this is how the exemption treats. I want all of you to read it carefully. Water other than aerated, mineral, purified. Maybe they are testing for the music session by the institute, I think. Just for kidding. Okay, water other than aerated, mineral, purified, distilled, medical, iconic, battery, demineralized. And please see the last section. And water sold in sealed containers are exempt. So other than. So now this is a case where this person is doing some sort of a service. He collects water from public bodies, does not process it to this level of purity, thus removes the solid, exchanges material, some semi-purification, and gives it in unsealed containers. The container is brought. That's why they save money. If water is otherwise 15 rupees a liter, he was offering at 8 rupees because they bring the container. So he processed it to some extent and then he was offering. So he took up a plea saying that I must be granted the exemption because I am supplying water which does not fall under any other category. And he said that the sealed container should be read as what? Rest of them will be almost sealed every time. They are even otherwise they go by their status. Aerated, mineral, purified, distilled, medical. They have a status. The status resulting in the distribution will deny them the exemption. And rest is, say people like me who sell a water, if I sell it in sealed containers for a price because I cost also the packaging material. If I do it in a sealed form, I should be taxed. But when I sell water or supply water which does not fall under this category and in unsealed containers, I must be granted the exemption. The authority comes and concludes you are doing some purification activity, therefore it's purified water. You pay tax. So there are two rival entries. One is purified water, another is water sold in sealed containers. It is not that he can pick it up from the pond and gives it, then he will get exempted. He picks it up from the pond and removes, exchanges material, solids, other things. He doesn't give purification to the required level which water is normally purified. And more importantly, the last category, water sold in sealed containers, he is giving it in unsealed containers. Anyhow, the AAR said nothing doing, go and pay tax. So somebody was charitable with water is not being given a charitable treatment. So let me close this with this slide and then take questions. I think I'm on time here. Thanks. So 6:30. See, this will be the final request I make to all the professionals. What is the take home to an individual because of the pandemic? Be very cautious about luxury spend on high risk investments. This is something which young boys and girls, it's a request. Your Mauritius holiday or a US tour or a Europe tour, let it stabilize. Keep a watch on your lifestyle. Then prompt the questions which our forefathers asked. Keep asking what is necessary. One end has to be consumption based. When we say consumption based, start from the basics and graduate as the economy grows. The cry today, the fear today for a commoner is at what price will rice be sold after a while? That is his concern. So these are all things which needs to be stabilized, which is stabilized right now. So therefore, necessity and these are all things which you are not used to it so far because you have been a free bird. You make a lot of money at a very young age and a lot of spend therefore has been your habit. So think about this after the pandemic, there must be some lessons for you to align with the changes as quickly as possible. Believe in India has always been a saving economy. Saving is our strength. Therefore, whether it's 1 rupee or 1,000 rupees, save. Cultivate the habit. People will save. See, the card business encourages people to use it with a lot of care and discretion, but also reading it. After all, they will come after us after some time. So this disconnect in card business leading to misery is not something which we have not been seeing in many. Now, trying to maintain such lifestyles and trying to push yourself. So this is going to be a trap. We are in a credit economy, in a card economy, and therefore one end is saving, another end is spending. What should pandemic teach us is something each one of you have to take a call. And most importantly, it's a request to all young girls and young boys. It's a request from all of us here. Please believe in marriage and please believe in family life. These 4 weeks, where have you been? Think if this is an investment for your life. Imagine if you have not had a family, if you have not had a support of your wife or your mother or the lady in the family, where would have we been to in life? Therefore, marriage and family are the strongest institutions. Our values, our traditions, our customs, our roots emerge from there. So it's a life learning curve for us through this pandemic. If there is going to be one positive takeaway, the rates of divorces should come to zero, and marriages should happen at correct ages, and all of you should live a very, very sensible and responsible life. We get children at the right age, rear them. India needs. There are countries where they are offering tax stops for getting legalized legitimate children. We should not be drifting into such societies. Therefore, let us leave it in a nice emotional note. Nothing like let's thank each woman, each person in family which has helped us to live and stay in peace these 4 weeks. With folded arms, let's thank them. And I thank Vishen and everybody in ICA for giving this wonderful opportunity. It was a pleasure addressing you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. Now we are going to see the question answers.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for a moment, sir.
Yeah.
So now the first question is whether after judgment of Mohit Mineral, whether we should still pay GST on ocean freight, whether government can go to Supreme Court for above matter, or can government come with a retrospective effect and amend Act and make it compulsory to pay GST on ocean freight from 1/7/2017.
I'll take it in 3 parts. I'll answer the third part first. See, this validation power of a government to get over, that is well settled in India. There are several constitutional bench judgments to support it. What do you mean by validation? The basis of the judgment has to be got over through a process of law, through a process of legislation. What is that you can get over as a basis of judgment through law? What is wrong with this judgment? Therefore, this is not, see, when will validation come? There has been a gap in law. You have exploited the gap in law and got an order in your favor. Then government can go back and fill the gap as pointed out by the High Court, get over the judgment over law through a legislative process. That is validation. This is not validation because there is no gap in law. They say it is unsustainable under and the unsustainability is not because of constitutional inabilities, because such a charge cannot exist. Therefore, third question, according to me, is ruled out. Second question, of course, they can go to Supreme Court. They are entitled to go. But we always go by probability. The judgment of the High Court is likely to be sustained. That is more probable. and therefore there is no need not panic. You should not pay. See what is happening today. Gujarat has given the judgment. There are cases pending across the country. So what other commissioners should do and all? There is a general practice. Whenever it's a union law, it is better to follow one high court for uniformity purposes. I think board should come out with some clarification, and it will be prudent also if they don't appeal, or even if they appeal in the absence of any stay, they should at least clarify that field officer should implement the judgment for the purpose of sanity. But when it comes to the call, I think you should not pay. That should be a call. It's a well documented judgment, and the law looks to be in your favor.
So, sir, can we say that since the judgment has been given by Gujarat High Court, even extended period will also not applicable from, it will be time barred so far as the extended period is concerned.
Correct. You can take that. Certainly, you can take that. That is very much available. And when you succeed on merits, whereas the case for extended, still that plea is also available.
Sir, second query is in respect of government's power to levy GST on RCM on ocean freight made on FOB basis. Most of transportation happens out of India and vessel sails hardly 1% of total distance in India. Whether the RCM levy can be challenged on the grounds of constitutional power of government to tax any transaction happening out of India. Right now, RCM is causing serious damage to working capital, and where outward supply is exempt, it is huge burden to the taxable person.
Yeah, see, they should go rather than challenging validity and all. It's all valid. How is it invalid? After all, the transaction source is traceable to India. But when something is not eligible for credit, then a burden of cost should be mitigated. And especially at times of present situation, this is something which they should resolve it through the council rather than taking it through the process of law. Yes.
Yes.
So the next question is, can a taxpayer consider the ocean freight for refund based on Gujarat High Court by the taxpayer?
You can go for a refund if you are paid, subject of course to unjust enrichment.
Okay. And the
sir, since this amount has been paid under reverse charge mechanism, I guess unjust enrichment will not going to be triggered.
What do you say? Because suppose your ultimate price has been loaded with this tax.
Okay.
In your service, in your output services or output manufacture, as the case may be, it's a reverse charge, but it's still an input tax. So therefore, they may ask you to demonstrate that fact. Yeah. Okay. Then can Ripon ask reversal of credit or RCM availed on ocean freight considering so it's not liable for that. See what this is a good point. So people who have paid and taken credit, I think they can go back to the High Court and get a relief there, because there are Supreme Court judgments and High Court judgments which very clearly say if something is revenue neutral, leave it there. So if there are any such specific cases who have been part of the petition, they can move a direction with the High Court itself and get this direction so that it becomes part of the judgment. Otherwise, in case tomorrow such reversals notices are issued, you'll have to rely on the general principle. If it is revenue neutral, then do not tax it. That's a well settled principle. It's tax neutral. Therefore, don't ask me to pay. After all, I've taken only credit of what I paid. You can't deny me both ends. Something which is available. Yeah. Next question.
ABC Private Limited is a private limited company registered under GST carrying on business of manufacturing of soaps. It has a fleet of transport vehicle that is trucks used for transportation of raw material, finished goods, etc. Sometimes on the return route, company gets third-party customers who pays freight charges for transporting their own goods on the return route. However, the company does not issue any consignment note for this transportation. Whether GST is payable on the freight charge is collected by the company who is truck owner. If yes, at what rate? If company issues consignment note, whether the answer will change, is the company eligible to ITC on truck purchase and its repairs? I guess, yes, sir.
Yeah, go ahead, Vishnu. What do you want? What do you guess?
No, if you want to give the answer, please, sir.
See, I have a principal question. This is a goods return is a continuum of the earlier transaction. Goods return per se is not a supply, but transportation is a supply of service without a doubt. Because he's transporting, he is unconcerned about whether it's a goods returned or a goods supplied. Therefore, to that extent, transportation charges becomes liable to service tax or GST, as the case may be. Now, once you pay GST on that, can this be an input service? Now, in ITC is a cyclic process. Anything used in business. Goods return is also part of business. Therefore, on that protects. And there's no one-to-one correlation in GST payment. So on that protects, my advice would be pay tax on the freight and take credit rather than contesting not to pay. There is a difference between the goods which are returned and a carrier which is returning the goods. Carrier is still a service.
Yes. Sir, as recession will took place in India, many people will lost their job. Did you think reducing GST rate will help to grow economy? If yes, then share your thoughts for this.
See, reducing anything will increase consumption because there is a fear to spend. There will be a fear to spend. In fact, I just read one of the trade bodies' recommendations. They are saying income tax exemption should be granted in such a way that they have identified a set of payments which are fixed cost and establishment cost expenditure. Now they want that to be incentivized. They say, you have been giving us 100% benefit. Why don't you think of giving 125%? So these are all the proposals that is going to the government. So incentivizing now will be the norm. Stability will come if you incentivize. That's one. Now, how stimulation and incentivization will be the basis? To what extent can the government go? It's a judgmental call. If they can go by, whether instead of giving a direct benefit on tax, whether they will give a deferred benefit so that tax collection at least doesn't stop. Whether they will go into that mode. If you collect so much of tax and pay so much of tax, we will rebate this much of tax, so that there is an incentive to sell. There is a push. So government may prefer that route to give back some credits, like your post-sale discounts. What do you people do? You are all professionals. How does business run? If you give a discount on the face value at the time of sales, then it will only promote that sale. But if you push the stockist to sell more and say, if you sell more, I'll give you a post-sale discount, then it has its own effects. So government will now think of incentivizing industry with tax benefits by trying to be more buoyant. If you do this, we will give you something. That will be better than giving it at the root. This is just our opinion.
Okay. Sir, the next question, sir, whether the Mohit Mandal case of Gujarat.
You told me only 2 questions. Is becoming 20. I don't mind. I hope people are there staying in the loop to listen, though. I don't want to be making them committed beyond the time. That's why I'm ready. I'm anytime.
People are waiting for your reply, and I guess they are like all are there waiting.
All are there, sir.
All right, okay. All right, then thanks. No problem. Then please, there are no constraints for me. It's my duty to be of use to all of you. Yeah, go ahead.
So whether Mohit Mandal case of Gujarat High Court striking down the serial number 10 of the RCM notification would apply to whole of India, and can the decision of Mohit Mandal can be applied also to the FOB transaction And the last in that is the can GST to be paid under protest in other territories to follow Mohit Mindal case, especially when the provision for the payment under the protest is not expressly provided under the GST law.
Now, third question I'll take first. There's an old judgment of India Siemens of the Supreme Court. When protest was not part of the central excise rules, a letter of protest was considered to be protest. Therefore, that is more than sufficient to say if you have expressed your protest in some way, then you have satisfied the law. So that's good enough for you to, but of course, any protest payment is subject to unjust enrichment. That law will not change. But if you have protested, that should be able to show, because statute does not provide you a modern method. You can have your own method. Now, coming to the second question, this can't apply to FOB, because in FOB, you become the contractor. It's a contract between you and the transporter. And therefore, this will not form, there will be a note there this design technology will come into play. There, for the purpose of customs, CAF value will be there. Your FOB will be added to CAF if there are actuals available. If actuals are not available, the law says 1%, 1.1.2, all that will be added. And you will be grossed up and paid. And this will become a separate service activity, which is exposed. Now, first question, I answered it even earlier. The judgments say any law, any decision by a high court on a union law, for uniformity, sake of uniformity, it should apply. But it is better, the whole case can come to a closure if only one notification, circular is issued by the board on the instruction of the council that we are accepting this judgment. That will help a lot. But now, see, we are now in a pandemic situation. We don't know when courts are going to hear. They are all going to hear only urgent matters. Thousands and thousands of cases would be pending, filing, all this will have to be cleared. So, any pressure, we'll have to only mention and see whether this order can be obtained by other high courts. But any demand at this stage, you go to the court directly and say that I'm covered by a high court, and therefore I should not be asked to pay. Protect yourself through that approach. But it should apply. They should follow. That's the law. Yes.
So if department later during assessment creates a demand on account of reverse charge mechanism, can the dealer claim the same as ITC after making a payment? I guess
after the judgment, I would not recommend him to do so. It's not prudent to do. It is better to challenge the order rather than agreeing to the order and paying, and tomorrow face the consequences of a reversal on ITC. It is time to move from the fire to the frying pan to the fire. I would not advise that. After the judgment. Before that, no problem. Yes.
So the next question is, sir, whether remuneration to the partner is to be considered in the aggregate turnover. If yes, whether it is liable to the GST.
What is whether remuneration to the partner? See,
remuneration to the partner.
Now, is it in the nature of a salary or it's a profit?
It's the appropriation of profit that we do in the at the end of the year.
But how to see profit share? Yeah, how does it become a supply and a consideration? You're in partnership law. You are a partner without which the firm cannot come into existence. Okay, and taking a profit share out of it doesn't become a consideration for rendition of a partnership service. I think it's slightly, the question itself is slightly far-fetched. I don't think there is a problem. Then next, whether rent paid to the direct. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So it is not at all a supply by the partner.
Correct. Second is whether rent paid to director is liable for GST under RCM.
Sir, what is taxable under RCM is the remuneration paid to directors who are we are not paying a salary to director. At that time, it's liable to pay. This rent is not in a different capacity. It is for the different supply.
Correct. Whether he rents it or you rent it, it's different. That's on an individual scale. It's not part of the remuneration. Okay, as a director, suppose a director rents his own building to you. You can't say I'm a director, therefore I won't pay tax on the rental license. Neither can he say, or neither this company can say that. You are right. You are right. Yes.
Sir, in this notification, the
Ah,
wording is that the payment to the director is covered under the RCM.
correct.
So the question
Now, are you
arises that
saying?
payment.
Yeah. Now, the rent payment. Suppose he engages, he goes on a rent and stays in one house, and raises the bill on you in the capacity as a director, and you defray the rent, right?
Yes.
Right. But you will you not say, when you factor the overall commission and all those packages, this will also be part of it?
So, sir, the question is that, for example, director is having a building and he is giving it to the company on the rental.
That is 100% taxable. 300% taxable. You
So
can't
that
say
will cover under
But that is under
RCM or
forward
under.
charge, not under reverse charge. That is what, like, there are two options. Right?
Go ahead.
Yes,
Go
sir.
ahead.
Now,
That's right.
Companies Act everywhere defines director as an agent of the company. Nowhere it is called as employees of the company. Hence, can we take the stand the government is valid so as to avoid any future litigation? Second, even if government in future amends Schedule 3 and excludes the directors from employees definition, what would be the financial impact if GST is obliged to pay under RCM? What is the view in case of independent directors where they actually work as consultant rather than the employees?
See, I have given you all the 4 options. The question is very clear. Don't be guided with the name tag. We will reach a wrong location. Go by the scope of his job and his contractual treatment. Never go by the nomenclature. And if the contract says he's employee and he's filing his returns, compliance to regulators, compliance to income tax, everything, you're deducting TDS, all that will make it a salary for that portion. And the managing director has to be an employee, adorning the hat also as a director in the board. So his salary can never be subject to GST. Yeah.
So with this, we have concluded all the questions till 6:30. And on behalf of Ahmedabad branch, we all are very much thankful to you for taking this session, deliberating it, and making it useful to all in this pandemic situation, sir. Sir, with your presentation, one thing is very much clear, that we are able to know which client are going to, so to whom we should give a full concentration for consultation on GST aspects or tax aspects, and I can say which clients require out of box thinking to evolve in this situation where the reset button has been put by the God in this era or a new era which is going to be started. Because if I see currently that we are able to have a shift, say internet or a Zoom teleconferencing or meeting companies, they are now getting much more calls. Or manufacturers, if they are into healthcare or a pharmaceutical or manufacturing of ventilator machines, then definitely they are going to have more export orders. If they change their mindset or attitudes, this lockdown is going to make us unlock from the mind. So attitude of unlocking the mind is very much important, and that is what we all require to see which practices we should adopt to take the opportunity of China route are being closed by the world. Sir, we on behalf of Ahmedabad branch are very much thankful that you came on this platform, you deliberated and given your precious time to us, and also a tips what a youngsters are required to do as a what I can say elderly
Old man.
elderly family person. Yes, elderly family person, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have been. Thanks, Bishan. Thank you so much. Thanks all of you.